Hello and welcome to this CresFest World, episode number 8. CresFest is a music festival which takes place annually at the end of March, the beginning of April, in Creswick near Ballarat in country Victoria. Organising a festival in a small country town puts you in touch with all kinds of interesting people, and this podcast aims to introduce you to some of them. Some are musicians, some are not. Some of the conversations focus mostly on music, some don't. Today I'm going to introduce those of you who don't already know him to OWEN SALOME from the Guanaco trio of Buenos Aires in Argentina. Owen grew up in country Victoria. How does a Victorian country boy end up in Argentina, and what is a bandoneon anyway? Stay tuned and you'll find out. We're really lucky to have the chance to hear the Guanaco trio at CresFest this year. We can't wait. Let's hear from Owen now.
Yeah, so I grew up in northeast Victoria, very close to Albury and Wodonga, in a little tiny town called Bothenga. And my parents are both musicians, both perform music. Neither of them has ever really tried to make a professional career out of being a musician, but we played music all the time when I was growing up. The music that we mostly played together was kind of Celtic-y sort of music, Irish, Celtic traditional music. My dad likes to play blues and, a bit of rock sort of stuff. He plays guitar. And my mum sings and writes songs as well. She plays violin mostly. And so I was fascinated with music since a very young age. My first instrument was the flute and actually a tin whistle. I actually have a drawer somewhere here with about 50 different whistles of different sizes and shapes and things in them still, because I love to collect little flutey things. So I started off making music and being very interested in traditional music from the beginning. And as I grew up, I took classical flute lessons and got increasingly more interested in more complex types of music. So I got very interested at one point in music from Brazil. But when I was about 15, I very, very randomly bought a CD of music, which was music of Astor Piazzolla. And I thought it was just amazing. It really blew my mind. And started to collect whatever CDs of Astor Piazzolla I could find in the, Sanity in Albury or whatever the local CD shop was. And became really fascinated with Astor Piazzolla, and then by extension started to investigate Argentine tango and learn a lot about the bandoneon and start to sort of uncover some of the richness that is the sort of the tradition of music in Argentina.
I have in my life listened to a lot of music too, and I came from a Scottish family where Scottish traditional music was a big thing, and instrumental playing. There was always a piano in the corner of the house, blah, 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 blah. And I listened to lots of music too, but I didn't necessarily go out and buy myself a bandoneon.
Like that came a little bit later, actually. So I moved to Sydney when I was 18 to go and study composition at Sydney Con.
Right.
And when I was there, I made friends with a fantastic musician, Emily Rose Sharkova, and we sort of connected to some extent over the fact that she'd been starting to dance tango, and we were both really interested in making tango music, and especially originally for dances, because nobody was really making tango music for dance. So we worked on that for a few years and recorded an album, doing completely autodidactically, just basically transcribing old recordings and dancing to them and talking to dancers and other people about what they wanted us to do that would make it sound more authentic, more correct for them. And then in 2014, we applied for and got some funding from the Australia Council for the Arts to go to Argentina and for us to spend 4 months in Argentina doing intensive master classes and work on a big project of kind of getting better at tango, which was a very intense experience. because we went to Argentina and all of our teachers said to us straight away, "Oh, you guys are great musicians, but you don't really know anything about tango." So we kind of had to start from scratch again. And Emily Rose she was playing accordion, but she bought herself a bandoneon to learn to play bandoneon. I was still playing flute and guitar.
I guess most people who are listening to this will not know what a bandoneon is. So you and I can talk about it with tremendous enthusiasm. But can you explain?
Yeah, so a bandoneon is an older, stranger relative of the accordion. It's technically not an accordion. It's technically a large concertina. And if you've never seen one before, imagine it's a big square box, about a foot square in every direction, and with bellows in the middle, and on the ends are the two heads, which have a big semicircular array of buttons. There's there's 32 on one side and 37 on the other side. And so you have a left hand and a right hand. The left hand has low notes and the right hand has high notes, just like on a piano. The kind of thing that makes it different to an accordion is that every single button is just a single note. So we have a range from the low C below the bass clef, the low C of a cello, all the way up to shrieking high A, which is the high A that a flute gets up to, sort of 4 or 5 lines above the treble clef. And it's fully chromatic across that entire range. But every single button is a single note. So if I want to play a chord, I have to find all of the individual buttons and find the position, the shape of that chord. And the kicker is that the left hand and the right hand are completely unrelated keyboards. The keyboard layout has no logic to it. Seems like a completely random array of buttons that you have to sort of brute memorize. And it changes when you're closing. So you have essentially 4 completely independent keyboards that you have to learn to get going, which makes it a very steep learning curve at the beginning for bandoneonists who spend a couple of years just really learning the keyboard and learning to play scales and things at the beginning, which makes it slow going. But the kind of back the front advantage of the very strange keyboard layout is that we can do incredibly big voicings at once. So I can play a voicing that would require 3 people on a piano with 3 different sets of hands. I can do that with just 2 hands with humongous big spreads of voicings, which gives you this very big, fat, rich sound from a single instrument, which is part of the appeal of the instrument. And the other thing that's really different to the accordion is that the bandoneon is much lighter than an accordion. It's all made out of wood. It's got metal reeds, but other than that, it's mostly wooden. So I can push a lot more air through it a lot more quickly than you can with an accordion and get a much bigger dynamic range and a much bigger palette of accents and kind of tone colors, if you like. Yeah. But that bandoneon really sort of never really took off anywhere except in Argentina. But in Argentina, it's used a lot in tango. Obviously, it's the soul of tango is the bandoneon, and it's used a lot in Argentinian folkloric music. So different styles of folkloric music for like traditional music from Argentina.
If you stroll around in your hometown, can you hear bandoneons being played in bars? Or I mean,
well, I mean, my hometown is Buenos Aires, so it's got the biggest concentration of bandoneon in the world. I have to say that you can't really find bandoneon anywhere else, but if I really was put to the test, I'd have to say the guitar is their soul of Argentina, because there's so much guitar happening here, But it's still quite an uncommon instrument, even though there's more of them here than anywhere else. Bandoneonists are still in short supply because they're expensive to get hold of, and they're a real difficult thing to get good at. It's very hard to get hold of one in Australia. I mean, everybody who has one in Australia has either got, that I know of, But I imagine I know of most of them. I think there's about 25 bandoneons in Australia that I'm aware of.
You know where they all are, do you? You've got
Most of them. I think I do. Most of the people either their teacher or either their teacher had one and sold it to them or lends it to them. They went to Argentina, or someone who was coming from Argentina brought them one. So like last year, I had one that a friend of mine was trying to sell, and we sold it to somebody who was looking for one in Australia. And so I flew out and did a tour with that bandoneon, and then left it with someone at the end of the tour.
Oh, what a marvelous thing to do! That's great.
It's yeah. But so yeah, at the end of our 4 months here, I had a big epiphany over that period that what I really was really enjoying making tango, but what I really wanted to do was fulfill the role of bandoneon. I love it. The instrument fascinated me. I like its role in a tango orchestra. And I spent every cent of money I had in the world and bought a bandoneon, and went back to Australia in 2015 and started to learn it. And then I came back for 2 months of lessons in 2017, and then at the end of 2018 I moved here full time with some grant funding from Create New South Wales and the Ian Potter Foundation to basically professionalise as a bandoneonist. And I've been here for 5 years working on that.
Well, what a fantastic thing. I'm proud to think that the Australian government, which is not always generous in terms of arts funding, is putting its money to good use in that regard. That's fantastic.
Well, a big shout out to the Ian Potter Cultural Trust, because they give up to $15,000 to young Australians who need to do some overseas study in order to further their arts careers, and they give out a bunch of those every year, and they're really wonderful. Buenos Aires is, first of all, a very, very, very big city on a scale that we can't really appreciate in Australia. The city has something like 15 million people if you count the city and the whole big urban block that is really Buenos Aires. And geographically, it wouldn't be much bigger than... I doubt that it would be as big as Melbourne or Sydney geographically. It's not terribly large. And it's nearly entirely high-rise from everywhere. There's no sort of central high-rise bit and then urban sprawl. It's all high-rise to the edge of... It's incredible when you fly over a city like this, because if you haven't seen a city like this before, it's a bit much to take in the first time you fly over it. It's just so big. And so it's also not particularly pretty. It sits on the edge of a huge big flat plain. It's one of the largest bits of fertile land in the world. There's this big plain that's just grassland for about 1,000 kilometers in every single direction before you hit anything, which is why they're so famous for their beef and their cows, because it's cow heaven. It's just pasture for every single direction. But the city itself just sits on the edge of a great big brown dirty river on the edge of a featureless plain, and it was famously a port city, but it's not a particularly beautiful environment. The city itself has lots of beautiful turn of the century architecture that's sort of sometimes in pristine condition and sometimes in moldy disarray. But what the city has that is really magical is it just has an incredible concentration of culture. It's got a great number of people packed into a really tiny place, and for a very, very long time it's been a city that's been home to a really large immigrant population. Originally there were the Spanish colonists, and then there were waves of immigrants from the east of Europe and from the south of Europe and from Spain, and then more recently, lots of immigration from inside of South America, and even lots of immigration from England at one point, because at one point Argentina was extremely rich, and so lots of people moved here for better opportunities. And so the consequence of that is that the city has always, for a very long time, it's been a very cosmopolitan and vibrant city full of a big melting pot of different cultures. And this is what led to tango, because there were immigrants from the south of Europe and from Spain and from Africa and from all over the place coming together, and they sort of combined all of their music and created new cultures. It's very chaotic. Argentina in general is very chaotic. It's very ridiculous bureaucracy, and nothing is ever runs on time, and nothing is ever predictable, and this can sometimes be charming and whimsical, and sometimes it can be incredibly frustrating. And that's kind of part of the balance of living here, is that you have to get used to the fact that nothing is ever really set in stone. Everything is constantly in flux. And so, you know, on the best version of that is that you can be walking down the street and hear some music and walk around a corner and find a little festival in the street that is happening that nobody tells anybody about, where you'll hear 5 of the best bands you've ever heard in your life, one after another, while you're sitting under a tree drinking some wine and, you know, eating chips or whatever. And then the bad version of it is that it can be a gargantuan exercise to do a very simple piece of paperwork or something, you know, to go to the post office and pick up a parcel can take hours and require endless forms and preparation. And so it's kind of a balance in some ways of having to put up with Argentina to be able to enjoy Argentina.
You could probably say that about every country, couldn't you?
This is true. Yeah, so we all met because we were studying at the University of San Martin, and we all started. We were the class of 2020, so we started studying and instantly went into lockdown for a year. Argentina had a very, very, very long and quite strict initially lockdown. So yeah, all 3 of us were wanting to make music, and we lived very close to one another, and it was convenient for us to do so at a time when it was nearly impossible to make music with anybody, and we were all starving a bit for opportunity to kind of, you know, express ourselves musically. We all, I'm Australian, and Ben, the guitarist, is Chilean, but he moved to Argentina partly because Argentina is very, very connected with its own music. There's a grand culture here of people, you know, normal, everyday people listening to folk music and listening to tango and listening to the kind of the music, the old musics of Argentina. And so those traditions are very much alive still, and very much living and very much supported by the general culture. And he really liked that. So that's part of why he kind of came here to study that music rather than do it in Chile, where there's lots of similar music, but I think it's not as rich of a culture of sort of general support and of music making.
That's a really great thing to be able to say about the place that you live. Here you could go for very many long days before you heard any Australian traditional music on the radio. You have to seek it out and find it, don't you?
It's a very common question that I get here is, what does Australian folklore sound like? And the answer is very hard, because I don't feel that there's a music that really occupies the same cultural space at the same cultural level as what tango and folkloric music here does, because here they have huge national competitions and festivals and radio stations and television and awards, and everybody listens to it. It's one of the big categories of music. Do you know? There's pop, there's what they call Latin music, so like salsa and cumbia and reggaeton. There's rock, and then there's folklore and tango. And people go into record shops and you'll find this will be the wall of folklore and tango. And, you know, people people know the singers and they know the tunes and they play it and they sing it, and it's lovely. It's lovely to see that. People out in the provinces, people go in on Saturday night, the whole community just goes down to the hall and puts on an event and eats and drinks and dances and plays and listens to it, and and there's a whole myriad of expressions of this music, from something very contemporary and introspective and instrumental to people doing something that's almost folklore rock, to things that are very traditional, and it's all very accepted and very enjoyed. It's interesting for me that the music that I most connect with here in Argentina is maybe not the music that I came to Argentina to perform. I think sometimes we don't know what we don't know about. And with the trio, we don't do any tango. Tango's kind of not on the menu. We mostly focus on the folk music of the northwestern part of Argentina, the sort of the deserty bit at the north. And the music that comes out of there is really lovely, and that's what we sort of ended up focusing on, kind of because that was what the three of us really wanted to play together at the beginning, and then from that we put a lot of time into researching and understanding and mastering it. We spent time working with really great masters of those styles, listening to recordings, doing all the stuff you do to learn. And there's one particular style we play which is called huayno, which is a style from the Andes, which they believe is influenced by pre-Columbian music. And it has a very particular rhythm that's really lovely, but it's very hard because it's not really one thing or another, and it's not really possible to really quantify it in Western notation without writing something that is just ridiculous to try and actually look at. And so what you have to do really is write an approximation and then sit and spend a lot of time listening and playing and getting a feel and learning to hear. For tango, there's a great deal of time spent listening to old recordings, and for folklore, what you have to do at some point is go out and play it with people out in the middle of nowhere, and out in the provinces, and you go to Tucumán or Salta and you spend time in a bar or in someone's backyard drinking wine and playing tunes with them. And that's how you get it right,
What a terrible thing to have to do. Go and sit in someone's backyard and play tunes with them. That's the highest form of musical endeavour that I can think of. Just let me say that we're really looking forward to seeing you and the other two. Your playing is absolutely beautiful, the three of you, and we're really looking forward to having you at CresFest.
We're really looking forward to being there. I'm super excited to come to Australia and bring this project that I've been working on for the last few years and show it off to Australia. I think it's going to go down a treat because, as far as I know, no band who plays the kind of music we play has ever really toured extensively in Australia. So I think people are going to really eat it up.
Well, wasn't that great? That was OWEN SALOME of Argentina's Guanaco trio talking with me about life following the bandoneon. Isn't that a great story of musical passion and commitment? The music at the start of the show is the Haas Sisters of the US, who were CresFest international guests in 2023, and today's music behind Owen's talking has been the Guanaco trio and some old recordings of Astor Piazzolla. If you've enjoyed that conversation, please listen to the others in the series and follow the series. You can follow it and get an alert when new ones come out. At the moment, I'm focusing on the backstory of some of the performers you'll hear at CresFest 2024, April 5 to 7. You can go online to buy your tickets at cresfest.com.au. And next time, I'll be talking to Melisande and Alex from Quebec in Canada from the band Melisande, and how their 15-year partnership has promoted and pushed the envelope of French-Canadian music. They are quite something. This is Neil Adam from This CresFest World. I'm looking forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.
you.